John Proctor is a local farmer who lives just outside of town. He is the husband to Elizabeth Proctor. He is a stern and harsh-tongued man. Abigail Williams is Reverend Parris's niece. She was once a servant for the Proctor household, but she was fired. She is a very good liar. Reverend John Hale is a young minister and supposedly an expert on witchcraft. He is called to Salem to examine Parris's daughter Betty. Elizabeth Proctor is John Proctor's wife. She is the one that fired Abigail. Reverend Parris is the minister of Salem's church. He is a paranoid, power-hungry figure. Many of the townsfolk do not even like him. He is very concerned with his position in the community. Rebecca Nurse is Francis Nurse's wife. Rebecca's wise, sensible, and upright woman, held in tremendous regard by most of Salem community. However, she falls a victim to hysteria when the Putnams accuse her of witchcraft and she refuses to confess. Francis Nurse is a wealthy, influential man in Salem. Nurse is a well-respected figure in Salem. He's an enemy of Thomas Putnam and his wife. Judge Danforth is the deputy governor of Massachusetts and presiding judge at the witch trials. He's honest and convinced he's doing right in rooting out witchcraft. Giles Corey is an elderly but feisty farmer in Salem, famous for his tendency to file lawsuits. His wife Martha is accused of witchcraft, and he himself is eventually held in contempt of court and pressed to death with large stones. Thomas Putnam is a wealthy, influential citizen of Salem. Putnam holds a grudge against Francis Nurse for preventing his brother-in-law from being elected to the office of minister. He uses the witch trials to increase his own wealth by accusing people of witchcraft and then buying their land. Anne Putnam is Thomas Putnam's wife. Anne gave birth to 8 children, but the only one that survived was Ruth Putnam. Ruth Putnam is the surviving child of 8, and like Betty Parris, Ruth falls into a strange stupor after Reverend Parris catches her and the other girls dancing in the woods at night. Tituba is Reverend Parris's black slave from Barbados. She agrees to perform voodoo at Abigail's request.
Abigail, Betty, and their friends are meeting in the woods to dance to Tituba's songs. Reverend Parris enters the woods and catches them trying to perform witchcraft.
Good girl. Now dance! My Betty's not gonna die, is she?
No, she's not gonna die. Okay. Come on, Betty. Betty, gotta stay.
Reverend! Susanna from Dr. Griggs is here. May she come in?
Let her in. Let her in.
He bid me come and tell you, Reverend said that he cannot discover no medicine for it in his books.
What do we do?
Search on!
So he been searching his book since he left you, but he bid me tell you that it looked unnatural and he don't know the cause of it.
Oh no. Poor Betty! Okay. Betty!
Mr. and Mrs. Putnam come into the room asking about Betty. Their daughter Ruth has the same problem as Betty right now. She won't wake up. They want to know what the problem is. Their daughter's eyes are open, but she won't move. They think that the devil has taken her.
Betty! Betty, wake up! Betty! Wake up! I want my mama.
Your mom is dead!
I'll fly to her. No! No, you won't! You didn't tell him that you drank blood. Shut it!
Act 2 starts off in the Proctor's home. John and Elizabeth are fighting because John thinks his wife won't forgive him for having an affair with Abigail. The servant of the Proctors, Mary Warren, disobeys their request and attends the trial even though they told her not to. Elizabeth Proctor wants her husband to testify and say that the girls' accusations are a lie, but he can't since they were in private when Abigail told John the girls were only dancing, and he fears nobody will believe them. At the trial, the accused are placed in front of Abigail. If they fall to the ground and act like spirits are attacking them, then they are sentenced to death. When Mary Warren gets back to the Proctors from the trial, she falls to the ground, acting like spirits are attacking her. She says that Elizabeth's name was mentioned in court, but Mary defended her. Elizabeth freaks out and can tell Abigail is going to accuse her of witchcraft so that she can marry John. Reverend Hale comes in. Elizabeth's name was mentioned at court, and he wants to find out more about them. As he questions them, he can sense some of their problems. Giles Corey comes in and reports that his wife has been arrested. Ezekiel Cheever comes to arrest Elizabeth. This surprises the Reverend because he thought she was not charged. Her husband fights it, but she is arrested anyway. To discredit Abigail, John realizes he has to publicly admit to adultery and free his wife. While at the Proctor house, Cheever asks Elizabeth if she owns any dolls and sees the doll Mary Warren gave her. Cheever remembers that Abigail had a fit at dinner in the Paris' house that evening. Paris found a needle in her abdomen, and Abigail accuses Elizabeth of witchcraft. He checks the doll and finds a needle. Elizabeth brings Mary downstairs. Mary informs Cheever that she made the doll while in court and did put the needle in it herself.
I cannot believe you. What?
John Proctor, you had an affair with Abigail. How could you do this to me?
I don't know what I was
don't
thinking.
understand how you could do this to me.
I'm sorry.
Help! Stop! Get away! Get away from me! Calm down, calm down. Help me, calm down, calm down, calm down. Elizabeth, your name was mentioned at the witch trial. Oh, calm down, slow down. Slow down, okay. Tell me what happened.
Your name was mentioned at the witch trial.
What? That's impossible. John, look at me. You have to testify for me.
I can't.
You have to testify against the girls. They're lying.
We were in private when they told me. They were just dancing.
This can't be happening. This can't be happening.
Act 3. Frances Nurse, Giles Corey, and John Proctor go to the court and bring Mary Warren with them. The men all have their wives locked up or condemned, and they are determined to prove their proceedings are a fraud. The chief judge is Danforth, the deputy governor of Massachusetts. Reverend Hale is also one of the judges. Frances Nurse presents a list of 91 people who have signed their names declaring they are good opinion of Rebecca Nurse and Giles Corey. Danforth takes the petition and orders all 91 people arrested. Giles Corey presents an affidavit affirming that Thomas Putnam convinced his daughter to accuse a man named George Jacobs. Corey says someone told him that Putnam wants Jacob dead so he can buy his land, and Danforth determines to know what the man told him this, and he arrests Giles Corey for contempt of court when Corey refuses to say. John Proctor brings in Mary Warren with her, signed deposition that states the girls have all been lying and faking. He explained that Abigail was caught dancing in the woods by Paris, as seen in Act 1. Danforth brings Abigail and the other girls. Abigail denies the accusations. Danforth asks Mary Warren to fake it like she did in the courtroom without the others doing it, but she can't. Abigail and the other girls act like Mary Warren is threatening them with her spirit. John Proctor grabs Abigail by the hair and calls her a whore. Even though it would destroy his reputation, he declares to the court that him and Abigail slept together. To test John Proctor's claim, Danforth summons Elizabeth Proctor and asks her if her husband is an adulterer. She lies and says no because she wants to protect him. So Danforth dismisses the charge. Reverend Hale, however, starts to believe Proctor. Abigail goes back to her trick of acting like Mary Warren is threatening her. Mary Warren breaks down and says that John Proctor works for Satan. And Abigail is telling the truth. John Proctor is arrested, and Reverend Hale denounces the court and leaves his place on it.
I have a paper right here with 91 names saying all good things about Rebecca Nurse and Giles Corey.
I want all of them arrested.
You can't do this.
This is an affidavit. And it proves that Thomas Putnam, he convinced his daughter to say that Jacobs did it, but he didn't. He just wants him to die so that he can buy his land. That's it. Who told you this?
I can't tell you.
Yeah. You have to tell me. If you don't tell me, it's a contempt of court and I'll have you arrested. Guard.
Act 4 takes place several months later in the jail. It's just before dawn on the day that John Proctor, Rebecca Nurse, and 10 others are to be hanged. The trials have put Danforth and Paris in a tough situation. They've already hanged a lot of people, so they can't turn back. So many of the villagers are dead or in jail that cows wander through the streets and no one knows who they belong to. Abigail has stolen all of Reverend Paris's money and run away. A fraction of the townspeople have turned against the trials and don't believe in them anymore. This day will be a turning point in the trials. It's the first day that important people with good reputations in the town are to be hanged. Reverend Hale tries to get them to confess. He doesn't believe they're guilty, but he feels responsible for the trials and thinks it will be his fault if any of them die. If they confess, he feels they won't be hanged. Danforth and Paris would like to see some confessions too, because they would prove the trials were justified. But so far, no one will confess. Danforth and Paris decide to let Elizabeth talk to John Proctor to see if she can get him to confess. Proctor doesn't know what to do. He doesn't see himself as a good man because he committed adultery, and then was afraid first to speak out against Abigail at the trials. He thinks he would be faking if he went to his death as a martyr. Since he is bad, he might as well live and try to help his family. He calls Danforth and admits he works for Satan, but when Danforth asks him to name some of Satan's other helpers, he won't do it. Hale and Paris persuade Danforth to accept the confession anyway. When Danforth gives the confession to Proctor to sign, he can't sign it. He was able to lie and give up his soul, but if he signs it and they nail it to the church door, he's giving up his name, which is the last thing he has. His children will suffer from his disgrace, so he rips up the confession and feels that he's found some goodness in himself. He's executed, but he dies happier than before.
John, just admit that you did it.
No,
Just confess. Tell me what you did.
I won't do it.
Why not?
Because I'm a bad man. I deserve this.
No, you don't.
Danforth. I work for Satan.
Who are his other workers?
I'm not telling you.
So you admit you work for Satan.
I admit.
Here, have him sign this.
This is a confession. If you sign this, you're saying, yes, I work for Satan and I confess.
I wrote it. Isn't that enough?
No, you have to sign it.
I won't.
Have him executed.